My name is Abdullah, but it wasn't always like that. Until 2 years ago, I was Captain Rohan Gupta, a name that echoed through the corridors of Qatar Airways with respect and admiration. 25 years commanding the skies of the Middle East, thousands of flight hours, 0 accidents on my record. On the outside, I was the definition of success. Own house in Mumbai, stable family, robust bank account, and the respect of all my colleagues. But there's an abysmal difference between being respected and being whole. Behind this impeccable facade, I carried a hatred that poisoned every fiber of my being, a hatred so deep that it almost cost me my sanity, and it was exactly this hatred that led me to the most transformative moment of my life. On March 15, 2023, flying from Delhi to Dubai on flight QR570, something happened at 37,000 feet that not only changed my professional trajectory, but revolutionized my soul forever. My full name now is Abdullah Rohan Gupta. I'm 55 years old, born in Mumbai, India, and I'm a senior pilot at Qatar Airways for more than 2 decades. Before continuing to share what happened on that flight that divided my life into 2 completely distinct parts, I would like to make a real connection with you. Please write in the comments where you're watching this video from. I want to know which countries this story is reaching. I want to feel like we're really talking, not just me speaking to a camera. Because what I'm going to share with you is not just my story, it's a testimony about how hatred can blind us completely and how divine mercy can find us even in the most unlikely places. I'm going to be brutally honest with you, even if this causes me deep embarrassment. For 25 years of my career, I harbored a deep and irrational hatred against Muslims. Yes, you heard correctly. I, who worked for a Qatari airline, who flew daily to Arab countries, who earned my living serving Muslim passengers. I despised them in silence. Every call to prayer that echoed through Gulf airports irritated me deeply. When I saw passengers kneeling discreetly for their prayers during flights, something inside me writhed with discomfort and rage. I developed a disturbing ability to maintain an impeccable professional facade while my heart boiled with prejudice. This poison had very deep roots in my family history. I grew up hearing traumatic accounts of the partition of India in 1947, when my grandfather lost his lands and had to flee with his family during the bloody conflicts between Hindus and Muslims. These narratives of pain and loss were transmitted from generation to generation like a cursed inheritance, and I allowed them to define my worldview for decades. But Allah, in His infinite wisdom, was preparing 3 devastating lessons that would completely destroy this armor of hatred I had built around my heart. 3 events that preceded that transformative flight to Dubai. First, the incident with the sacred book that almost drove me to madness. Second, the supernatural nightmares that began to torment me every night. And third, the growing and terrifying sensation that something divine was constantly watching me while I commanded the skies. 2 weeks before the flight that literally transformed my existence, something happened that haunts me to this exact moment. It was a routine flight from Mumbai to Doha, a route I had flown hundreds of times. The plane was moderately full, a typical mix of businessmen, families, and migrant workers returning to the Gulf. During the in-flight service, one of the flight attendants, Priya, came to the cockpit. "Captain," she said hesitantly, "I found this in seat 23C. The passenger went to the bathroom and forgot it." In her hands was a small Quran with a dark green cover, clearly well used and loved. The edges were worn from constant touch, and there were small paper markers between the pages. What happened next deeply shames me to this day. Something inside me exploded. All the accumulated rage, all the prejudice I had nurtured for decades, everything came to the surface at that moment. "Why did you bring this here?" I asked with a coldness that made Priya step back. "It's just a religious book, sir," she replied, clearly confused by my reaction. "Store this in the cargo compartment," I ordered dryly, away from the passengers. Priya obeyed, but I saw in her eyes that something had changed in how she saw me. After she left, I was alone with my toxic thoughts and a decision that would haunt me for weeks. 15 minutes later, when we were certain we were over international waters, I did something I never thought I would be capable of doing. I got up from my seat, went to the cockpit cargo compartment where Priya had stored the book, picked it up with hands trembling with rage, and threw it through the small emergency disposal window. At that moment, while I watched the sacred book spinning in the air before disappearing into the clouds, I felt a perverse and sick satisfaction. It was as if I was finally teaching a lesson to something I couldn't understand, symbolically rejecting everything my family had taught me to hate. But what I didn't expect was that this blasphemous action would trigger a series of supernatural events that would take me to the absolute limit of sanity. That same night the dreams began. They weren't ordinary dreams, they were vivid, terrifying visions that seemed more real than reality itself. I saw the book floating in the air, its pages opening by themselves, while voices whispered verses in Arabic, a language I didn't consciously understand, but which somehow touched something ancestral and deep in my soul. The voices weren't threatening, they were soft, melancholic, as if they were crying for me. I woke up every dawn in cold sweat, with an overwhelming sensation that I had committed something much more serious than I imagined. It was as if I had violated something sacred and universal, something that transcended religions and nationalities. My wife Kavya began to worry. "Rohan, you're screaming during sleep," she told me one morning, "and you repeat words I don't understand." But the dreams were just the beginning of something much bigger and more disturbing. After the book incident, extraordinary and inexplicable things began to happen during my flights. The aircraft instruments showed mysterious failures, but only when I was in command. My co-pilot never experienced the same problems. The autopilot would disengage for no apparent reason, forcing me to take manual control at critical moments. Communications with the control tower would fail momentarily, leaving me in frightening silence at altitude. But most disturbing were the voices. During moments of silence in the cockpit, especially when we flew over the ocean, I began to hear soft whispers reciting verses in Arabic. At first, I thought I was having auditory hallucinations due to stress, but the voices were consistent, always the same words, always the same melodic and hypnotic cadence. My wife Kavya noticed my mental deterioration almost immediately. I was constantly irritable, insomniac, looking over my shoulder as if someone was watching me. I lost weight, developed tremors in my hands, and began avoiding mirrors because I couldn't bear my own gaze. "You need to take medical leave," she pleaded several times. "Something is wrong with you, Rohan." But my pride wouldn't allow it. How could I explain to my superiors at Qatar Airways that I was being haunted for disrespecting a religious book? How could I admit that the most respected pilot in the fleet was hearing mystical voices during flights? My career would be destroyed, my reputation ruined forever. Most terrifying was the constant sensation of being judged, not by people, but by something infinitely bigger and more powerful. It was as if the cosmos itself had become my silent judge. Every time I climbed to the heights I loved so much, I felt like I was flying directly into a divine tribunal, where my soul was being weighed and found wanting. The maintenance technicians were perplexed. Every time I reported instrument failures, they ran complete diagnostics and found absolutely nothing wrong. "Captain Gupta," said the chief of maintenance after the third inspection in 2 weeks, "these are some of the most reliable equipment we have. There's no technical explanation for what you're reporting." But there was a third transformation happening, something even deeper and more mysterious that I would only fully understand on that fateful flight to Dubai. Before continuing, I need to speak to you who feel that something is blocking your connection with Allah. If your prayers seem unanswered, if you feel strange disturbances at home, or if your health doesn't improve even following treatments, this could be spiritual attack. I went through this. I know how terrifying it is. The spiritual world is real, and Shaitan especially attacks those who seek to approach Allah. That's why I created the Guide to Ruqya and Spiritual Protection and Habits of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for healthy living, with authentic sunnah methods for protection and healing. Symbolic value, because your spiritual protection is priceless. Link in the first comment. Without me consciously realizing it, something fundamental inside me was changing. The armor of hatred I had meticulously built over decades was developing microscopic cracks. When I saw Muslim families praying discreetly on my flights, instead of the usual automatic irritation, I began to feel something different. It was curiosity mixed with a strange nostalgia for something I had never experienced. Their expressions of absolute peace during prayers contrasted dramatically with the emotional turbulence I constantly felt. There was something in their faces, a serenity, a connection to something greater that I secretly envied. How did they achieve this peace? What did they know that I didn't know? In the sleepless dawns that followed, I began to do something I never thought I would do: research about Islam. Initially, my motivation was tactical: know the enemy to better understand my aversion. But as I read about the 5 pillars of faith, about the importance of mercy, rahmah, and forgiveness, maghfirah, in religion, Something inexplicable in my heart began to soften. I found verses that spoke about Allah forgiving those who sincerely repent, about how hatred is a prison we build for ourselves, about the importance of universal compassion. They were words that seemed written specifically for my desperate situation, as if someone had observed my journey of pain and offered exactly the remedy I needed. One verse in particular hit me like lightning, and whoever repents after his wrongdoing and reforms, then Allah will accept his repentance. Allah is forgiving, merciful. Quran 5:39. I read and reread these words, feeling something moving in the depths of my soul, as if layers of ice were melting after a winter that lasted decades. But I still fought fiercely against these new and frightening feelings. I was clinging to familiar hatred, like a shipwrecked person clings to debris. It was toxic, but it was all I knew. Hatred had defined me for so long that I didn't know who I would be without it. It would be like dying and being completely reborn. And then came that day that would change everything forever. Flight QR570 from Delhi to Dubai, March 15th, 2023. I didn't know it, but on that plane was the man Allah had sent to help me find the peace I desperately sought, without knowing I was seeking it. It was a crystal-clear morning in Delhi, when I boarded what would literally be my last flight as Rohan Gupta. The airport was bustling with typical morning energy, families saying goodbye, executives checking emails, Muslim pilgrims returning from Umrah with their faces radiant with spiritual satisfaction. Flight QR570 to Dubai was completely full, 187 passengers, a vibrant mix of nationalities and religions. Many were Indian Muslims returning home after visiting family, Arab businessmen concluding deals, and entire families moving to the Emirates in search of better opportunities. Normally, this passenger composition would make me tense and irritable, but on that specific day, I felt something completely different, a strange anxiety mixed with expectation, as if I was about to participate in something monumentally important without knowing exactly what. During takeoff, something extraordinary and inexplicable happened. All the mysterious technical problems I had faced in the previous weeks simply disappeared. The plane responded to my commands with absolute perfection, as if we were finally in complete harmony. The instruments worked flawlessly, communications were crystal clear, and for the first time in weeks, I heard no whispering voices. It was as if the universe was giving me a truce, setting the stage for something transcendental. 40 minutes after takeoff, when we were leveled at 37,000 feet over the Arabian Sea, my co-pilot Arjun informed me that there was a situation in the cabin that required the commander's attention. "It's the passenger in row 12A, sir. He's specifically asking to speak with you." This was unusual. Passengers rarely asked to speak directly with the commander unless there was an emergency. I left Arjun in command and went to investigate. In row 12A sat a man of approximately 65 years old with a perfectly groomed white beard, wearing a simple but elegant tunic. His eyes radiated deep wisdom and a compassion I had rarely seen. When our gazes met, I felt as if he could see directly through all my defenses and masks. "Captain Gupta," he said with a soft voice but loaded with gentle authority, "my name is Usman Qureshi. I can perceive that you are carrying a very heavy burden." His words hit me like an emotional meteor. How did he know? How could a complete stranger see through the facade I had maintained perfectly for weeks? I sat in the empty seat next to him, something I would never do under normal circumstances. It was completely against protocol to leave the cockpit, to chat informally with passengers. "I don't know why I'm here," I confessed, surprised by my own vulnerability. "Something compelled me to come talk to you." Usman smiled, with a kindness that instantly melted all my defenses. "Allah works in mysterious ways, my brother. When a soul is ready for healing, he sends exactly the right people at the right time." And then, for the first time in weeks, maybe years, words flowed freely from my mouth. I told everything. About the Quran I threw from the plane, about the terrifying nightmares, about the hatred I had carried like a disease for entire decades. I spoke about my grandfather, about the partition, about how prejudice had been passed down as family inheritance from generation to generation. Usman listened to everything with infinite patience, without a trace of judgment in his compassionate eyes. When I finished, he remained silent for a long moment, as if he were processing not just my words, but my entire soul. "My dear brother," he finally said, his voice charged with emotion, "Allah is Ar-Rahman, the extremely merciful. He is Al-Ghafur, the forgiver. There is no human action, however serious it may be, that is beyond the reach of his divine mercy. What you did was deeply wrong, but recognizing this error with sincerity is already the crucial first step for complete redemption. He continued, the hatred you carried was not really yours. It was the unhealed pain of previous generations, transmitted like an infected wound. But today, at this moment, on this plane flying between heaven and earth, you have the opportunity to break this cycle of suffering forever. Then Usman did something that literally changed the course of my existence. He opened his small travel bag and carefully withdrew a small Quran, identical to the one I had thrown weeks before. The dark green cover, the edges worn by loving use, even the small paper markers. It was as if the same book had returned to give me a second chance. Would you like to touch the book you once rejected with so much hatred? He asked gently, extending the Quran to me. My hands trembled violently when I reached for the sacred book. The exact moment my fingers touched the cover, I felt something indescribable, an absolute peace I hadn't experienced in months, maybe years. The tortured voices in my head fell completely silent. The crushing weight in my chest disappeared like smoke. For the first time in decades, I felt complete. It was as if all the fragmented parts of my soul were finally coming together again. La ilaha illa Allah wa Muhammadun Rasul Allah, Usman whispered with deep reverence. There is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. With tears of liberation flowing freely down my face, I repeated the sacred words. There at 37,000 feet altitude, suspended between heaven and earth, floating among the clouds I had arrogantly commanded for 25 years, I finally found my true spiritual home. What will be my name in faith? I asked, my voice choked with emotion. Abdullah, suggested Usman with a radiant smile. Servant of Allah, because now you understand that we are all servants of the Most High, regardless of our origin, color, or nationality. At that sacred moment, Rohan Gupta died, and Abdullah was born. The conversion was not just an abstract spiritual change, it was a complete revolution in every aspect of my existence. When we arrived in Dubai 3 hours later, I was literally a completely different person. Abdullah Rohan Gupta had been born in the heights, baptized by the clouds and blessed by divine mercy. Usman, whom I discovered to be a respected imam from a mosque in Dubai, immediately connected me with the vibrant local Muslim community. In the following days, I learned the basic prayers, Salah, the fundamentals of faith, Iman, and how to purify not just my body, but my soul through the ritual of ablution, wudu. Each prayer was a transcendental experience. When I prostrated toward Mecca, I felt as if I was finally returning home after a lifetime lost in the desert. The words in Arabic, which had previously irritated me deeply, now sounded like celestial music. It was the language of my redeemed soul. My family's reaction was complex and emotionally charged. My wife Kavya was initially shocked and confused. Rohan, what happened to you? She asked, studying my transformed face. You look different, lighter, more at peace. I explained everything to her. The journey of hatred, the book incident, the nightmares, and finally the miraculous conversion on the plane. Kavya, being a wise and observant woman, immediately saw the radical change in my personality. The irritable, insomniac, and tormented man had disappeared, replaced by someone serene, loving, and spiritually centered. 6 months later, after observing the complete transformation in our home, where hatred was replaced by love, intolerance by compassion, and anger by serenity, Kavya made her own deep decision. She also converted to Islam, choosing the name Aisha. Our children, Arpit and Priya, now Yusuf and Mariam, grew up seeing a practical demonstration of how faith can completely transform a family. The home that once echoed discussions about historical prejudices now resonates with prayers in Arabic and conversations about universal compassion. But the story doesn't end with my conversion. Do you remember the Quran I threw through the airplane window weeks before? Well, some months after my conversion, something absolutely miraculous and inexplicable happened. A simple fisherman named Hassan, working in the waters near Mumbai, found a strange object in his nets. It was a Quran in perfect condition, as if it had never touched the corrosive salt water of the ocean. The pages were intact, the ink completely preserved, and there was no sign of water or salt damage. Hassan, being a devout Muslim, took the sacred book to local authorities, who finally returned it to Qatar Airways as lost property. When the lost and found supervisor showed me the Quran, I recognized it immediately. It was exactly the same book I had thrown away in a moment of blind hatred. The implications were overwhelming. The book had fallen from 37,000 feet altitude, remained in the ocean for months, and yet was in perfect condition. It was as if Allah was sending me an unequivocal message. You tried to destroy my word, but it returned to you as proof that my mercy is greater than any human hatred. Today, this miraculous Quran occupies a special place of honor in my home, not as an object of worship, for in Islam we worship only Allah, but as a constant reminder that divine mercy can reach even the most hardened hearts and transform even the most lost souls. I continued flying for Qatar Airways, but now as a completely transformed man. I use my leadership position to actively promote tolerance, understanding, and unity among crews of different origins, nationalities, and religions. The man who once hated Islam with passion has now become one of the most eloquent and respected voices for religious unity and multicultural harmony in the aviation industry. I implemented cultural diversity programs at our base, organize interreligious dialogue sessions, and constantly work to tear down barriers of prejudice wherever I find them. Each flight is now an opportunity to build bridges instead of walls. More importantly, I share my story whenever possible, at aviation conferences, in mosques, on television programs, and now here with you. Because I deeply believe that if my transformation can inspire even one person to abandon hatred and embrace compassion, then the entire journey will have been worthwhile. My story is living proof that it is never, absolutely never, too late to change. It's never too late to abandon hatred and find true peace. If you're watching this video and carry hatred in your heart, whether against Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, or any other group, know that there is an infinitely better path. Tolerance, universal love, and forgiveness are forces much more powerful than any historical prejudice. Hatred is a prison we build for ourselves, but the keys to freedom are always in our hands. Today, when I fly through the same skies where I once felt so much hatred and torment, I feel only overflowing gratitude and universal love. Each takeoff is a powerful reminder that Allah can elevate any soul that sincerely seeks His divine guidance. Each landing is an opportunity to touch the ground as a better person than when I took off. The pilot, who once threw a sacred book to the clouds in disrespect, now carries that same book in his heart with absolute reverence. Transformation is real, redemption is possible, and divine mercy is infinitely greater than any human error. If this story touched your heart in any way, please share this video in your WhatsApp groups, your social networks, with friends and family. Maybe someone you know urgently needs to hear that radical transformation is possible, that divine forgiveness exists, and that it's never too late to find the true peace we all seek. May Allah abundantly bless all of you, regardless of your faith, origin, or journey. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be with all of you.